how much research do you do when you write a book?
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Well, for like anything but groovy, I didn't have to do a lot of research because it was my life. I remember it. I have books set in the Civil War. I have books set in the 1600s in Scotland. I have books set in 1540 in the time of King Henry VIII.
Right. Yeah.
I do a boatload of research. As a matter of fact, I was realizing that for a 250-page book or 225-page book, I have at least 150 pages of notes. And you can go down some rabbit holes. There's so many things to discover. And I love history, so I don't mind researching, but you can get way off track. But it's really fun to come across some nugget that you want to include in the book. You're like, there's probably very few people who knew that about King Henry VIII, whatever it is. And so I enjoy history, and I enjoy learning and researching. But yeah, it does, for those type of books, historical ones, yes, it does take a lot of research.
This episode of the Ampéritif podcast is produced and distributed by Be Connected, a social media management firm in Northeast Wisconsin.
Okay, welcome everyone to episode 7 of the Ampéritif podcast. And today, my guest is Amanda Lauer. Say hello, Amanda.
Hello.
And if you're paying attention at home, I'm your host, Mike Lauer. And you might wonder, wait a minute, are those guys related? Okay, we'll get into that in a little bit. And but before we do, I just want to say thank you to Amanda for being patient with me as we get going. I had some technical difficulties getting the episode up and running, but here we are, and everything is working. And so finally, we get to kick things off. But I'll, as a kind of recap, I'll say the Ampéritif podcast is a podcast with mixology, music, and entertainment. And so Amanda comes to us in the entertainment category. And so Amanda Lauer is an award-winning author of several book series. And so let me see if I can get all these. So Amanda, we have the Heaven Intended series, Royal and Ancient, Anything But Groovy, Visible and Invisible series, and Lucky and Blessed. And when we were talking earlier, you've got a new book coming out, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. But,
sounds good.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, anyway, welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. All right. So, as we always do, we start with a cocktail. And Amanda, when we were talking, she says, "Well, Mike, I don't really drink." And so I said, "Perfect. That's not a problem at all, because you're not the first who we've made a mocktail for." And so we're going to talk about that here. I've prepared it ahead of time. So this one in particular has a few steps involved. So I actually started preparing this on Wednesday night. And so I'm looking forward to trying it. I haven't really tried it yet. And Amanda's been sitting there so patiently waiting because it's been, I poured the cocktails a bit ago while we were working through the technology issues. So, but let's do this. Amanda, let's try it out.
Okay.
And then I'm going to tell you about it.
Okay, sounds good. Tastes like I'm in Hawaii on the beach.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is a punch, a pineapple punch, and specifically it's a whipped pineapple punch. So that describes the whipped topping that you might see. So we'll throw some pictures in here, but I'm holding mine up to the camera. The whipped topping has had some time to sort of filter down into the rest of the cocktail. So let me find my recipe here. The ingredients are a half a pineapple that we cut into chunks, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, a peel of lemon, so peeled the lemon off, and then juiced that same lemon, 5 cloves, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 4 rooibos tea bags, and 4 cups of boiling water. So all of that went into a container together, and with the hot water poured over the top of it, and then it just sat in the tea infused for a while. And then after about 15 minutes, I took the tea out and then let the rest of the mixture sit overnight. And so that all of the flavors from all those ingredients, the pineapple, the lemon, the cloves, the sugar, just was able to kind of infuse, and then strained that off, kept the pineapple, and then I pureed the pineapple, and then the pineapple was mixed into the whipped topping, so that's a homemade pineapple whipped topping on top of the cocktail.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, quite involved. So it was a lot of fun, actually. I really enjoyed making it, and I took a bunch of video and stuff, and so we'll put that out there when the time comes to share kind of how it all came together. And then, of course, the recipe will get published on the blog as well, and so people can take a look at that. And I would love to see pictures or maybe some footage of people making this. I'll say it's a family project, so get the kids involved. But anyway, what did you think?
Oh, it's great. I love it, actually. It really does, especially the pineapple whip. I think it does remind me of being in Honolulu or something.
Sure. So the whip topping in particular, I have really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. I have to be honest, I may have tried it a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, I'll say I'm not a big fan of tea, and so I was a little skeptical going into this one. It definitely has a tea hint to it, but it's not real strong. So for me, this is quite enjoyable, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I would drink this anytime.
There you go. I would too.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, Amanda, then is to name the cocktail. So if there's any immediate inspiration, you're welcome to shout that out. Otherwise, we can let that simmer for a while, and you can think about what you think would be a good name.
Well, I do have my branding, which is Heaven Intended.
Uh-huh.
So I think we could work that into the title.
Yeah, maybe heavenly something.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, so we got to come up with the something. I'll give you a little bit more background. So if you've been listening and watching the podcast, you will know that Lulu is our mixologist. So I don't come up with these recipes. I'm not that creative or smart. So I have Lulu, the mixologist, to invent these recipes for the podcast. And so what I do is, like I did with Amanda, we talked for a little bit, and I don't know if you remember what you told me in terms of cocktail inspiration, but pineapple was one of those things.
Yep, for sure.
And then I give Lulu a little bit of background about you. And in your case, I sent her to your website, amandalauer.com, and she read a little bit about, of course, the different novels that you've written. And she kind of honed in on the Civil War novels in particular, the Heaven Intended series. And she did a little bit of research and learned that tea was apparently a popular drink that was consumed in the Civil War era. And so that's where the inspiration kind of came together, your love for pineapple and the tea that sort of was inspired by the period. Of course, plenty of people drink tea today, but so that was a little bit of the research that Lulu shared with me in terms of, I'll say, what inspired it. At the end of the day, it's a unique modern beverage with quite a flavor.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, me too. So usually what happens, Amanda, is we get to talking and people forget to drink. So don't be afraid to.
I'll keep drinking. I'll be good. No problem there.
So I'm gonna do that.
Now I have to too.
So good. All right. So heavenly. I don't know. Heavenly what?
Well, let's see. I think Heavenly Vista. I think that might be the name of the ranch in my book. I've written so many books now, I'm beginning to forget, but that could work. Something along that line.
Heavenly Vista. Yeah. Okay.
Or Hasta la Vista. I don't know.
Heavenly Vista. I'm trying to think of a vista, like another word for vista. Yeah.
Like sunrise or sunset or heavenly sunset. It's kind of
Nothing's jumping out at me, but while we're letting
heaven on the beach.
heaven on the beach. Oh, that's funny. I thought I'd mention the name of the tea that I used. So it's a rooibos is a type of tea, like a black tea or a green tea, or and if you can't find rooibos tea, you can use like an English breakfast tea would be a good alternative. Anyway, this was the only rooibos tea I could find at Pick and Save where I bought this, and it's I'm gonna try to find the camera here. I think I don't know if you can see that from there, but it's Numi.
Okay.
And so I imagine you pronounce that Numi.
That's what I would guess.
I think most people would guess that, but I think it's more fun to say Nummy. So I'm going with Nummy. That is Nummy tea. They'll find this and they can tell me how it's really pronounced. And so that's one of the main ingredients. And then of course the vanilla and the sugar and the pineapple, but also cloves. And I'll be honest, I'm not like a big cook, so when I heard cloves, I was thinking like garlic cloves.
No,
that wouldn't be any good. So no, actually cloves are a thing, and I don't know if you know a lot about cloves, but I think they smell kind of like black licorice.
Oh.
But I don't know if other people would describe it that way, but they definitely have a very strong spice, and so that is definitely very present here as well, but not overpowering. So it all comes together quite nice. So I would say that Lulu did an amazing job again designing a cocktail. So Heavenly Vista.
There you go.
Heavenly Vista. I think that kind of has a ring to it.
There you go.
Yeah. So all right. Well, good. So let's kind of transition then into the next segment, which is really to kind of get introduced to you, Amanda. So I'll start by answering the connection. Everybody's like, wait a minute, same last name. So yes, we are related in the sense that Amanda's married to my cousin. So yeah, that's how we know each other, I guess. And when I thought about this podcast and the idea of bringing together music and entertainment, the inspiration for me was I've just been blessed in life to know so many people who have so many different talents who've actually made a career from those talents. Those types of career in music and entertainment are just, maybe I'll say, not a traditional type of career, in that they are not necessarily a stable or guaranteed. It relies on a lot of entrepreneurial capability and a lot of initiative and the ability to kind of self-promote and all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's all driven by passion.
Yeah.
And so it's a sort of coincidence that we're related. That's how we know each other, certainly. But for me, the reason that you're here is because you've made a career as an author. And that's what I want to talk about and learn more about. And so on the podcast, we've had musicians, we've had let's see, why can't I think now? I got all of a sudden
a talent agent.
The talent agent, yes, thank you. A talent agent / actress. I've had solo artists. I've had band directors, choir directors. So different types of people in music and entertainment, different career paths, different types of careers. And so you're the first author that we've had. And so let's see. Now that I've done the introduction,
all right,
to get us kind of into a little bit of the fun, we have a new segment that we've done on episode 6. Now this will be the second time, and it's our icebreaker questions.
Okay.
And so it's just a way to kind of get us going and get you talking a little bit.
All right.
And in front of you is a little ice bucket.
Okay.
And in there are the icebreaker questions.
Oh gosh, I don't have my glasses on. We'll see if I can read these. So just pick one random one out.
Yeah, pick out a random one. Hopefully, they're
they're typed nice and
they're
large.
big enough. Yeah.
It says, "Who is your favorite production company or brand, and why?"
Your favorite production company or
When you say
brand?
production company, are you talking music? You're talking they make products or what?
These are
Movie studios?
movie studios. Yeah, that would be more what I'm thinking of. I'm getting a little nervous now. We'll see.
Yeah.
I might have to edit this out. These might have been the questions for my last guest.
Oh.
I made up a whole set of questions for you, Amanda. I'm hoping these aren't the wrong ones.
Okay. Well, I could tell you my favorite production company.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Actually, I was just speaking with them this morning. C-Max Media. C-Max Media.
Okay.
Based in Virginia. And the reason they're my favorite production company is because I've signed a kind of a preliminary contract with them because I'm trying to get one of my books made into a movie. And they're very interested in helping me in that process.
Exciting. So, okay, we talked just a couple weeks ago, and I don't remember hearing about this. So this sounds new.
Yeah, well, it's something we've been working on for a long time. There's a lot of pieces that need to be put in order to get a movie produced, whether it's
of course.
getting the funding,
Yep.
finding someone to write the screenplay,
Yep.
director, producers, all those things. So we're working at it. And
Yeah.
I always say it's a God thing. If it's God's will, it's going to happen.
Sure.
If not, it won't.
Yeah. So again, like that part's not new. C-Max is the part that sounds new to me.
Yeah, they've been around for several years. It's actually a Christian movie production and streaming service. And they've got hundreds of titles on their website, and they strive to make family-friendly movies, videos, all sorts of things like that.
Sure.
Just a really fantastic company. The CEO is a friend of mine. Her name is Ashley Zahoran. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But she's just a wonderful lady, and she's been so helpful with me in this project. And we do hope that someday we're on a set together when one of my books is finally being made into a movie.
So, all right. So you signed a preliminary contract. Is that a commitment to a specific book or?
Yes.
Okay.
This is for my book, Anything But Groovy, which is sitting to my left here. It's a time travel story based on my 7th grade life eons ago. But basically, a 13-year-old girl in this day and age is playing volleyball, gets hit in the head, and she wakes up, and she is in her mom's body and has to live her mom's 7th grade life in 1974.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, so like the story itself revolves around things that actually happened to me, including being bullied by the biggest jock in the school, and but how we made it so it's more relevant for younger people now is we made it a time travel so that this girl has to go through all the things that her mom went through, and she has a lot higher opinion of her mom when this incident concludes than she did at first. And it was just it was a fun book to write. And what they kind of call it's a cross between Freaky Friday and Back to the Future.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is something that would make a great film, like a PG-rated film that families could watch together.
Yeah.
And reading the book, a lot of moms read it with their daughters or their sons who are that age. And it sparks a lot of great conversations about what was life back for you, whether it's the 70s, 80s, or 90s when mom was growing up. And so I think the book serves several purposes, but it's got kind of a redemptive ending that people like. So I think that's why it's selling as well as it is, I'd say.
Yeah, well, that's great. So I'll tell a quick story. My wife is actually, so she's a youth minister at a church here in town. And there's a group of women at that church who are in a book club, and they're reading this book. They're reading the Anything But Groovy book. And so they're loving every minute of it. And I think there's a lot of nostalgia is the sense that I get from people who read it. Just people who grew up in the 70s and, or around that, probably surrounding decades, really find, a lot of nostalgia in the book. So that's kind of a fun connection. But.
Yeah. And I was going to add that because this was my real life, I think I was so traumatized my 7th grade year by this whole bullying thing that every single detail is like seared into my mind. So some of the things might have come from 6th grade, 8th grade, or whatever, but we're saying this all happens 7th grade. And that's why, like you said, I talk about nostalgia. I can remember so clearly just like everything that year. And I can't even tell you what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember this year.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, so the games we were playing, the things we got for Christmas. Okay, so the outdoor games, we were playing kick the can. For Christmas, everybody was getting mood rings.
Sure.
I don't know if you recall, there was this like football game that my brothers got. It was like electronic and it like shook and the little football players went bouncing across this metal field. Maybe you're a little younger than me and you don't remember that.
I'm a couple years younger, but
Yeah,
you know,
like-
we got a lot of hand-me-downs. So
Yeah, like
sounds
Rock'em
familiar.
Sock'em Robots and
Oh, yeah.
Twister
Yeah.
and I went to a Catholic school, so of course we had the sisters who are our teachers, and that was always interesting.
Is some of that in the book then, too?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
The priest, we had a really young priest, like a
Yeah.
brand new priest come, and he was like, I remember seeing him walking. I'm like, oh my gosh, did John Denver become a priest? He had the blonde hair, the bangs, the round glasses, and he was all into the modern rock masses, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And the other priest was very old school, so it was kind of interesting, you know, seeing them interact with each other.
Okay.
But yeah, all these things happened, and I just wrote about it and made it seem as though my 13-year-old daughter was living my life and trying not to mess it up. She assumed she was going to go home at some point, but she just didn't want to mess it up too badly. And she had no idea why the jock was, you know, being so mean to her mom. And to be honest, her mom didn't know why he was either. So
Yeah. Well, so as you were talking, I was sort of thinking to myself that maybe the reason that you remembered that time in life is because those are such formative years.
Yep.
So you have, what, 4 kids, if I remember?
We have 4.
Yeah, and we have 5. And so actually it's my daughter's 12th birthday. So she's in 6th grade.
Okay.
And so after you leave here, there's going to be a bunch of, you know, preteen girls coming over, and I'm just very struck by how formative that kind of middle school age group is. And so anyway, so that was just a thought. Like that's maybe why you remember, you know, the 7th grade so vividly, because it is such a formative time in life. So, all right, let's try another icebreaker question. We're going to see if I screwed up here because that question didn't sound right to me. I think that was the last guest, unfortunately.
This is for me.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
How much research do you do when you write a book?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Well, for like anything but groovy, I didn't have to do a lot of research because it was my life. I remember it. I have books set in the Civil War. I have books set in the 1600s in Scotland. I have books set in 1540 in the time of King Henry VIII.
Right. Yeah.
I do a boatload of research. As a matter of fact, I was realizing that for a 250-page book or 225-page book, I have at least 150 pages of notes. And you can go down some rabbit holes. There's so many things to discover. And I love history, so I don't mind researching, but you can get way off track. But it's really fun to come across some nugget that you want to include in the book. You're like, there's probably very few people who knew that about King Henry VIII, whatever it is. And so I enjoy history, and I enjoy learning and researching. But yeah, it does, for those type of books, historical ones, yes, it does take a lot of research.
Yeah. So, all right. And how do you do your research?
Well, it's online like everybody. I have no idea how Margaret Mitchell ever wrote Gone with the Wind. Seriously.
Yeah,
of course, at that time, there's probably still people alive from the Civil War. But yeah, I do a lot of research. I do find, though, that not everything agrees. I was really struggling with my book set in the 1600s in Scotland because I guess they say like the victors write the history books, you know, something along that line. Mm-hmm. And you can find all different theories on wars and massacres and civil wars and things in that era. And it's been interesting trying to figure out what is the most agreed upon history of that time.
Sure.
So I struggle with that. And some things just are not recorded in history that I have been able to find. Mm-hmm. What I really could use is if I could find like a English, like a professor from England who would actually go through my books, they'd probably be, everybody knows that, you know, Charles II did this or that, or Charles I got beheaded, not his son, Charles II or whatever. But
so you're really it's your intent to be as historically
Yeah.
accurate as you
Yeah,
can.
for sure. Because I love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner, and I believe that if you hold the bar high, especially because I generally write YA, so for teens and above,
Mm-hmm.
I love to learn, and I think they want to learn too. I think they enjoy learning facts about places they've never been or hadn't heard of,
Uh-huh.
and maybe they can win some trivia contests here and there.
Yeah, well, why not? Yeah. So, cool. Well, all right, let's try another one. See what we get. I'm feeling so relieved that these
Yeah,
are.
I know. I can answer anything. I can wing it. This one just has a question mark, so I'm not really sure what that.
Okay. Well, so funny little side story. When I was writing up all these questions and printing them out, I had a couple of spaces left and I couldn't think of a question, so I thought I'll just leave the question mark in there, and I thought if you pull one, maybe you could ask me a question,
Oh, wow.
and then just put you on the spot.
So what is it like being related to, the famous author Amanda Lauer?
Oh, wow. All right. Well, it's fun, I'll tell you, because your name comes up often enough, and so do the books, and people always ask, are you guys related? And I get to say, well, actually we are.
We're all from the same stock.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so and as you know, like I told you the story earlier about my wife and the book club, and so because of that personal connection, we can do some neat things like introduce you to some of those types of groups, and it's just a fun connection to be able to make for people, and so I really enjoy that.
Oh, I should mention too, I have a new book that I just wrote that is just now being beta read, as they say, and and it's set in Nina, but it's a fictional Nina.
Yep.
And there happens to be a couple in there, and their names are Mike and Meredith. Interesting thing. The gal works at the church where this young lady goes to.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe you'll be a beta reader and you can tell me if you like it.
That's curious. I am very curious. I can't wait to read this. I can't wait to read this book.
Thank you.
So speaking of book reading, so I'll make a little bit of a confession. I am not an avid reader. I kind of go back and forth. When I do read a book, and I'll maybe read 1 or 2 books a year. I watch a lot of documentaries. That tends to be I do love learning, and that's how I do it. But so when I do read books, I'll flip back and forth between business books and then just books for fun. And so I read one of your books recently, and my wife was kind of floored, and not so much floored that I read a book, but that I finished it in like 3 days. I think it was. And so it was the first book in the Heaven Intended series.
Oh.
And I read it cover to cover, and I went through it, and I got really immersed in the story and in the time period and the characters, and so I really enjoyed it, and my wife was really just struck by that because she doesn't know me to be an avid reader. So her, on the other hand, she'll read at least a book a week.
Oh, wow. That's very impressive.
So,
I try.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Well, the interesting thing, the fact that you read that book, it's based on a true story.
Oh,
a gentleman who was living in Appleton, my city, who I'd met, who had an extensive collection of Civil War paraphernalia. And I was writing a story. My background actually is journalism, so this author thing is kind of somewhat new. I've only been doing this 10 years, but I've been a journalist a lot longer. So I was writing about this gentleman's Civil War collection, and he told me the story about his great-great-great-uncle who had served in the Civil War, and it was such an interesting story. I always said, someone's got to write this guy's book, a book about him. And I think it would honor his family because, he really went through some crazy things in the Civil War.
Sure.
And no one else was stepping forward. So when I made the decision I was going to write a novel, and I was challenged by someone to get one chapter written and meet her for coffee, I chose this topic. But the reason that I mention this is because when I was trying to get it published, I had a couple different avenues. Nothing was really working, and I finally found someone who was willing to publish the book. And she said, just on one condition. And at that point, I was like, I'll do anything that you ask to get this book published, right? And she said, can you change it from third person to third person limited perspective? I'm
Okay.
like,
That
yeah.
sounds very technical
Yeah.
to me.
I'm like,
I don't
yeah,
understand what that means.
absolutely. You know, you need it in 2 weeks. I'll get that for you. She's like, oh, I'll give you a month or two. I'm like, okay. Well, I didn't know it meant like rewriting the whole book, basically. But so third person, you know what everybody's thinking. You know what's in everybody's head. Third person limited perspective, you only know like one or two people what's going on in their head.
Okay.
So how the book works is every other chapter, you're in the female's head. And this is during the Civil War, so she's on the home front.
Uh-huh.
And then the opposite chapter, you're in the male's head, and
Uh-huh.
he is on the war front. So you're seeing the Civil War from two different angles.
Sure.
And also, in all of my Civil War books, the man is on one side of the war and the woman's on the other side of the war. So they not only have the conflict going around them, they have a conflict between them.
Sure.
And how they resolve it is they rely on their shared faith to survive the last year of the Civil War. So each of these books starts on the same day in 1864 and ends on the same day in 1865. The young man and the young lady are on opposite sides of the war, and each book is different. Sometimes the girl is on the side of the South, sometimes she's on the side of the North. Every book is a little different. Each couple has some relation to somebody in a previous book. So it'll be like the first book, Nathan, his business partner, Dominic, is featured in book 2. Or one, Nathan, they went to West Point, and Nathan's roommate is one of the guys in another book.
Okay.
So that's why I think I'm hearing a lot of really great feedback from guys that they like the books too. Usually they'd be like, oh, I don't read love stories. My husband would be the first person to tell you he doesn't either, but he loves the books I write, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and I'll have to say I did too. And I'm also with your husband. Not much of a romance novel. That sci-fi is actually kind of my go-to.
Oh, okay.
For what it's worth. So there's some sci-fi in the anything but groovy, certainly with the time travel.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
And plus, I have another time travel which is called Royal and Ancient.
Oh yes.
That's the one that's set in 1691 on the verge of the Glencoe massacre. This isn't particularly per se about the massacre. It's a fictional work.
Yeah.
So we don't want people, because to this day, people do not know the full story of the Glencoe massacre, but basically the men who were like in charge of the clans in Scotland, some hadn't signed this oath with the King of England that they would basically forego their religion and follow the Church of England. Some signed it, and they signed it too late. So one clan was singled out, and they were massacred for not. Technically, apparently, they just signed it too late, but they were just made an example of, and so they were massacred. So this time travel, even though my books, they might touch on dark or hard subjects, war, that kind of thing, but there's also a lot of humor laced into this, because this is a girl from this day and age, 17 years old, and she gets struck by lightning, and she wakes up on the oldest golf course in the world, Royal St. Andrews, surrounded by men who are wearing kilts, and she thinks she's at the golf course she was working at, because it was like Founders Day, so all the guys were wearing kilts that day anyhow, and she comes to realize that she is not where she thinks she is, and life is drastically different, particularly for women in the 1600s.
Oh yeah.
So I guess you would say they actually call it a fantasy novel because time travel is considered fantasy.
Sure. Okay.
But I think you would like that too, especially if you like to golf, and I know you do.
I do like golf. Yeah.
And I love golfing, so I had to set one on a golf course, right?
Yeah. Why not? What a fun plot premise though. So very cool. I want to go back to something. So you said that I don't know if it was just the first book in Heaven Intended, but that it was based on a true story. And so I'm curious about the elements of that have their origins in that story.
So basically, my friend's uncle, who served in the Civil War, he was from the eastern part of the United States. His mom died in childbirth, and when she was having like her 8th or 9th child. And so the dad sent all the kids to live in near Chicago, Tonopah, Illinois, to live with his sister and her husband, who had a cattle ranch in Tonopah, Illinois. And the dad had a business that he was running, and he couldn't take care of the children properly. So they were all sent there. Well, about So this young man, he's working on the ranch. He learns the ropes, how to do this. And there was another young man they had hired to work on the ranch. And the two of them decided to strike out and go to Texas and buy a few hundred acres of land and start their own cattle ranch, which they did in 1859. 2 years later, 1861, the war broke out. Texas went with the South, and these were two young men from the North. So in order to not be conscripted to fight for the South, they agreed to provide beef for the Confederate Army. So they were doing that from 1861 until 1864. At that point, the South needed men more than they needed the food. So anyone between the ages of 18 and 35 was conscripted against their will to fight for the South to replace a regiment that had been decimated by either the measles or the chicken pox. I forget which one.
Okay.
So they just took all these guys and off they went. Well, neither of them wanted to fight for the South because at that time, this young man, his brothers were fighting for the North.
Oh, man.
And he did not want to face his own brothers.
Sure.
So he actually concocted a way to leave a Southern camp and get into a Northern camp without being shot, because he also was wearing a Confederate uniform.
Of course, yeah.
Which would make, they had a tendency to shoot first, ask questions later. In real life, he did this twice because he got recaptured by the South and then had to do it all over again.
Oh, my gosh.
And so it's just a crazy story, but they had everything from this guy. I mean, everything you could. They had his uniform. They had his official portrait. They had the letters he had sent home. And so I was able to use that as research for the basis of this book. And to be honest, when I wrote that book, I was a journalist. And I always wanted to write a book because I love historic fiction. But at that time, when I was growing up, they had all what they called the bodice rippers, so not the clean versions. And so I always thought, I want to write a historic fiction that's a clean, sweet love story.
Yeah.
And so how I even ended up doing it, and I have to thank my friend Melissa, because I was shooting photos for the paper one day, and this guy was telling me that his wife writes books and had an agent in New York City, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to meet her because I really want to write a book. And so we set up the thing. This was at Thanksgiving time. We'll be like, okay, we'll get together the first Wednesday after Christmas or after New Year's. And she said, just pick a topic and write one chapter of a book, and I'll do the same thing. So we did. We got together, and I should say that I had 6 weeks to think about this, and 3 hours before I left, I started the first word, and I didn't even know how to write a book. I literally looked behind me on my bookshelf and pulled a book off and said, how do they do the he said, she said thing? I had no idea. I read hundreds of books, never wrote one.
Sure, yeah.
So I figured it out. Get to the coffee shop. The sheets are nice and warm. Hand them to her. She hands me hers. And that began 2 years of us getting together once a month on a Wednesday afternoon, 1 o'clock,
how cool.
and trading chapters. And she ended up getting her book published, multiple books now. Melissa Westmeyer, check her out. And that was it. So when I wrote that book, though, I said, this is just a crazy hard amount of work. And you think writing it's hard. It took 2 years to find someone who would publish it. And then all the rewrites, and it's just a crazy amount of work. I said that's it for me, just one and done.
Okay, I did that. Yeah.
And then I was like reading somewhere like someone had written 12 books. I'm like, 12 books? Oh my gosh! Because I was like I'm like, if it's going to take this long I will be like 99 years old before I get these books written if I ever wanted to do another. But I said I'm never doing another one, so it doesn't really matter. The book comes out. A week later, my friend Jane calls me and she says, I love the book. She said, I shared it with my grandma. She loved it. And grandma wants to know when the sequel's coming out. I'm like, pure panic.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no sequel. This took literally, it was probably a 7-year process altogether. And she's like, well, grandma wants to know what happened to Dominic. And I said, I don't know what happened to Dominic. I don't have any of his letters. I only have the letters from Nathan's. And I said, let me think on this, pray on this. And, I was just inspired to keep going. And so they have this thing called NaNoWriMo, once a year in November, where people all over the world are challenged to write a 50,000 word book in the month of November. So in 30 days to write a 50,000 word book. I thought it was absolutely impossible. It turns out I can do things when I'm under the under the wire, right?
Yeah.
Trying to the pressure. But I did. I wrote the sequel. And then of course you can't just have 2 books in a series. You have to have 3. So I made a trilogy. I thought I was done, and then 2020 comes around and the pandemic, and 2 different production studios from Hollywood actually reached out to me. They were interested in making A World Such as Heaven Intended into a movie, which was like shocking, amazing.
Yeah.
I would have never really thought of it. Well, I guess I had thought of it, but I hadn't. It's just such a difficult task. You can't even imagine. Anyhow, so the one gentleman from Hollywood, he said, "Would you consider doing a 4th book in the series?" I'm like, "Possibly." He said, "We'd like to have a person of color as the main character. Do you have a character maybe from one of the other books that you could bring and have her be the female protagonist?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I do."
Okay.
So that was book 4. And then book 5 came about because I had a photographer here from Neenah that I had worked with for years at the newspapers I worked for, several of the papers I worked for.
Uh-huh.
And he was telling me about his daughter was so beautiful. She'd make the perfect cover model for one of my books. I was like, well, okay, you can shoot the picture and we'll see if I can come up with something. And he did. He shot the pictures. They were absolutely beautiful. She was just the sweetest thing. She's in college now. And by chance, the gentleman ended up unexpectedly passing away because from complications of diabetes. This is like in 2021. And I'm like, well, I really have to get this book written in his, to honor him. And so I did.
Uh-huh.
So that book is called A Faith Such as Heaven Intended. And now there's going to be a 6th book. I have literally 1 chapter written, but my grandson for 2 years had been asking me, "Grandma, will you write a book where I'm the hero?" I'm like, of course, how you could say no to like a 10-year-old, right? So
he's just grabbing at the heartstrings.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And so we sat down last year and I went through lots of different options. It could be any time you want. You could be a superhero. You could be anything you want. And he looked at all the options and said, "I want to be the hero of one of your Civil War books."
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
he doesn't know this yet, but the title is called A Hero Such as Heaven Intended.
Oh,
Yeah.
how sweet.
I just love the whole concept. I've got it, somewhat. I don't do a whole lot of plotting, but I've got the general idea of how this book is going to work. And we're bringing back the bad girl from book 1. If you remember, she killed somebody. She'll have a redemptive moment.
Oh.
Do you remember who that is? She shot, I shouldn't even tell you because people haven't read it, but James. So there was a girl who did something bad in book 1. And so she's going to meet this young man and she's going to have, she's going to change her life. She's going to turn her life around.
Okay.
So,
all right.
yeah, that was that. And then in between there, I wrote Anything But Groovy, the time travel. That was relatively easy because it was my life. I just had to write my memories. And then I wrote the Royal and Ancient, which is the one we were talking about, set in Scotland.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The one I finished, in September is Lucky and Blessed. And that's the one that is set in the time of King Henry VIII. Right now, it needs some major work on my part as far as editing because I sent it in for the first round with the company I've been working with, and they sent me a whole bunch of things back that need to be fixed that I'm working on. I've been taking tons of notes and figuring this out. I hope Monday is the day that I start that project. And in between here, what happened is I've spent time each month, at least a week, up 1 to 3 weeks, at my daughter's house in Ohio between September and February, because she and her husband welcomed a new baby into the family and they could use some help, and I was happy to be able to do that. The last time I was there for 3 weeks, from the end of January till just like the week before last, I decided to write a book. It had to be something that wouldn't take a bunch of research because I had from 9 p.m. until midnight every night, the only 3 quiet hours in a busy house with little ones.
Uh-huh.
And so I wrote every night, and I wrote a book set here in Neenah, and it's a Christmas story based on a true story, and it's a really, really cute. And yeah, that one's finished. I have a few people, just
Yeah.
reading it to kind of get some feedback from people, but
Sure.
it really is a cute story. So
Does that one have a name yet, or
it does tentatively.
are you
So-
waiting before you?
Well, we changed the name of Nina. At first, we were going to use Winnebago Rapids because that was the original name of Nina.
Uh-huh.
But we're going with Winnebago Falls. So it's a very
Okay.
Winnebago Falls Christmas, tentatively.
All right.
So it's one of those. Nina does so many fun, cute little Christmas things
Right,
that
yeah,
we incorporated
yeah.
a bunch of things in there, and the trauma, the drama. So
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Nina, there's an event every Christmas at downtown called a Very Nina Christmas.
Yes.
So yeah, a very Winnebago Heights Christmas.
Winnebago Falls.
Or sorry, Winnebago Falls Christmas. I'm sorry. So the I gotta poke around at that a little bit. The first one is when they built the new ice rink downtown Nina. It like everybody has sort of joked that it looks like the set of a Hallmark
Oh,
movie.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so now to hear that you've written a romance,
And we're hoping
now,
it'll be that type of movie in the end.
yeah. And so I'm really eager to read this and see if it sort of fits the whole kind of storyline there. But if you haven't been to downtown Nina, it's just a very beautiful downtown, and it does kind of have this movie set.
It does, really.
sort of
Perfect.
feel to it. Yeah, I actually think they should close off the downtown and make it foot traffic only,
Yeah.
and like close it completely to vehicle traffic, just a couple of blocks. They do that actually in a lot of towns in Europe, and so. But anyway, you were teasing me earlier, and I want to go back to this because did you really name a couple characters in that book, Mike and Meredith?
I did.
So obviously, if you know, I'm the host, Mike Lauer, right, of the podcast. So that's and my wife is Meredith. So, and was that intentional? Was there?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Aw.
yeah, so basically, I thought of friends that I knew who lived here, and I just tried to incorporate them into the book. And it's only first names anyhow, so
Sure,
it's not
yeah.
But I thought, how fun would that be? And I would only do it with people's permission. And the same thing is like with businesses. If I mention a business downtown, I would only do it in the end if the business owner gave me permission. So I think it'll be fun. I would think that if someone asked me, I would be thrilled to be in somebody's book. That'd be cool.
How cool. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read it. It'll be fun. It'll be, of course, because we're Nina people, we'll all have a lot of fun kind of, sharing it with each other and talking about it. And so I'm looking forward to that. So what does that process look like? How long does it take for, so now you've written the first,
well,
you've written the first draft, let's say.
So yeah,
and what happens next?
It took me 5 weeks to write a 50,000 word novel. And then the first round of copy editing took less than a week, maybe 3 days. You're just basically reading the story, making sure that things are consistent, that you don't have glaring errors and such. Now I have a few people who are reading it. They're called ARC readers, like advanced reader copies or beta readers. So they're reading it now. I'm waiting for them to give me feedback just to say if, this is great or this doesn't sound right or doesn't ring true or whatever. Hopefully they all love it as much as I do. And then after that, we have we have to make sure we get permission from everybody who's mentioned in the book.
Okay.
Like if there's a business mentioned, it might be the actual name of the business, and it might be the owner's name.
Yeah.
But we would only do it with their permission. And to make sure that we have complete permission, this is based on a true story. So from the people involved, if they know about it, they're reading it right now. And just to make sure that the book honors their relationship and what happened in their real life, and that they, enjoy it. And so there's those kind of steps. After that, it will actually go to a professional copy editor. I have a lot of friends in the business, so that it shouldn't be too difficult to find. And we'll have a cover designed. I have somebody in mind for that already. And we have never done this before, but I think my husband John and I will be self-publishing this just because we want to get it out this fall.
Okay.
Because if you go to a traditional publisher, it's usually an 18-month process.
No kidding. Okay. I was wondering, how long does that take?
So doing it this way, if I'm hiring professionals to lay out the book, and the technical stuff, design the cover, all that good stuff, it goes a lot faster because they can all be working on their separate thing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to go through this chain of command in a traditional publishing house.
Sure.
So we're going to try it and see how that works. And it'll be our first foray into self-publishing, but my husband's retiring in May. So he does want to be more involved in what I'm doing with these books. And
Oh, cool.
ultimately, we hope to be on some movie sets together. And he loves to learn as much as I do, but he likes the technical stuff. He wants to see the rushes. He wants to see how the filming is, how they set up the cameras, all that stuff. I'll just be more like just taking the whole scene in and, enjoying it.
So I want to key in on something there regarding the movie. So we talked about that a little bit, and you talked a little bit about this production company that you've got to deal with, that you're working on. But so I'll step back a second. Again, because we're related, I've known you for a long time, and I've been around since the beginning. Like, I remember the first book. I remember when you wrote it, when it became published, and how cool I thought that was. And hey, I've got a cousin who's an author now, and it was a lot of fun. And so then I remember the first time this idea that it could be turned into a movie. And I remember you were looking for investors, and we had some conversations about that. And I just thought, how cool! Like, that's really exciting. And then I remember, I'm going to get distracted here by the side story, but you actually got hired to write a movie script. And so maybe we can come back to that piece.
Yep.
But what I wanted to maybe ask you about was like the kind of the backstory on getting a book made into a movie, and how did that start? It seems like it fizzled out a little bit. Like what's kind of that storyline there?
Yeah, well, so basically for us, I don't have an agent for my writing. I don't have an agent for my script, for anything like that. So I'm not doing this in the traditional way. So originally I met with a gentleman who was living in Neenah, who produces movies and such and directs and writes. And we were trying to actually put something together for my very first book, A World Such as Heaven Intended. But I was tasked with finding the investors. And what I realized is obviously that's huge. And Civil War movies are really expensive to make.
Right.
And so I worked on that for a year, talked to a lot of people, got some interest, but I just really felt like God was saying, this isn't the right timing. So then during the pandemic, a couple of people reached out to me who actually were movie producers who had funding, that type of thing. And for one reason or another, those didn't work either. And then I came to the conclusion that we have to start with a smaller project, something that's, when I say small, you're talking $1 to $2 million, not $15 to $20 million, right?
Not a Civil War with all the special effects and all of the actors and the extras and
So then I really didn't want to keep pursuing people asking for money. I mean, investing in movies is obviously, it's risky.
Yeah.
For some people it pays. And I really do feel like the company I'm working with, the CMAX, that they actually have a plan where their plan is to make money with your movie. And so that's ideal, right?
Right, yeah.
So we were looking at this movie, and by chance, talking with a gentleman, and he said he was interested in actually financing the entire thing.
No kidding.
Which was like a shock.
So one
gentleman.
Yeah. Don't they call those executive producers?
Yes. So anyhow, we were working with him for quite a while, and then something happened with, he owns several businesses in the area, and he had to invest capital into his businesses and wasn't able to do it. So once again, I feel like we get really close and then it gets pulled back. Then he suggested he pointed me towards his business partner. That's a more thorough conversation we will have last fall, and he is tied up the first quarter of the year. So we have tentatively set to talk, next month, basically April. So I don't know what will happen with that, but in the meantime, now we're talking about just at least getting the script, the manuscript, not the manuscript. I can't even think of the word, the screenplay.
The screenplay,
to get the screenplay written, because now there's several more entities interested in, but nobody will look at it if it's in book form. They need to
Got
see
it. They've gotta see the
screenplay.
Yeah.
So that's a conversation I was having this morning with a producer and my husband and a writer. And so we're looking at doing that route.
Okay.
And if we do that, there's several people who want to see this screenplay when it's written. It'll take like 5 weeks if we go with the gentleman we were talking this morning. You know, we're still debating which direction, but
Sure.
I'm always trying to see if I want to do what God wants me to do. I want it to be led by him. And if he throws roadblocks up, then I'm like, well, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I should mention too, I mean, I've had such a wonderful life. I'm so blessed. I mean, I'm literally writing my 13th book right now. I never in my life thought I would do that. If nothing ever happens with this, if I never have a movie, I will still say I've had the most wonderful, lucky, blessed life on this planet. But I do think there's merit to my work in that there's a wide audience of families who are looking for family-friendly movies and entertainment for their children and for themselves. So I'm going to keep plugging away. Yeah. And in the meantime, I wrote another book when I was with my daughter, a children's book, which just went to a publishing house yesterday. They're looking at, who knows? I have never written a children's book. I've never written a rhyming book. I don't do poetry. But it was a book my daughter really wanted for her kids. And I'm like, well, I'll figure this out. So I did.
Do you have an illustrator?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, I've got a recommendation. We can take that offline.
Okay.
Off the episode, but let's talk after. Okay, so I want to go back to something I alluded to a little bit earlier, and that was the movie script. So you actually, throughout this period, there was, I remember, and I'm hoping I recall this correctly, that you were asked to write a screenplay, or at least edit one.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so I'm curious about that story. How did that happen? And then, how did it turn out?
Yeah, everything is just so interesting in my life because I do things that I don't know how to do. I say yes before I actually, and I learn on the way as I go.
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah. So my husband and I were in San Diego. This was 2017. We were at a friend's Super Bowl party, and she is a quite wealthy woman and had a lot of people at the party, including actors and movie producers and stuff. And I just struck up a conversation with this gentleman who was a movie producer. And my husband and I ended up doing something with him on a different project, but he was writing a movie called The Islands about how Christianity was introduced to the Hawaiian Islands in the 1800s.
Okay.
And I had seen one of his movies, and I thought, he could probably use a little copy editing. I don't know what they even call that in the movie business, but I suggested, I said, I copy edit for a living, one of my many jobs. I said, is there such a role on a movie? Because I'd be happy to look over your next screenplay and see if things can be fixed or improved or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, sure, and he paid me for the project, which is fine. After I sent him all the fixes, he just got back to me and said, would you be okay if I added you as one of the co-writers to this screenplay? Because you did so much work on this. This is amazing, and it's really going to make it a better movie, basically. And so, of course, I agreed. And so the movie The Islands came out in, I want to say 2018. It was probably 2018 because that's why we ended up going to Hawaii for the premiere of the movie.
Oh, sure. Fun.
Yeah. So it was amazing. And it was crazy. I'm trying to think of the actors, and they're very famous actors, but Marina Savannah. I can't think of her last name. I'm not saying that right, but anyhow. So seeing these actors saying the words that I wrote was very surreal.
Yeah,
very surreal, and it was really a cool experience. And then we ended up winning the 2020 Red Letter Awards for Best Screenwriters. This team. It was me, this gentleman who was the director, and an actual professor from Hawaii. Okay. The three of us ended up winning this award. It's kind of like the Christian version of the Oscars, maybe a little smaller version, but
sure.
But it was kind of a cool thing.
Still,
not to say I would ever write a screenplay from scratch, because I don't feel like that's my forte, and I'd be better off writing books and letting other people do that. But it was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
I learned how to use the software. I learned how to fix things, and it turned out really well in the end.
So if someone wanted to go out and find that movie today, like where would you look for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen it on, we've had the streaming service. I don't even know if it's streaming right now. You can check if it's somewhere out there, but it's called The Islands.
Okay.
And it came out, I think, like I said, 2018. It was a really good movie. Oh my gosh, the lead actress was amazing. It was based on a true story of a woman, a young woman who was like the princess of this Hawaiian island,
Mm-hmm.
and how she had been introduced to Christianity, and she wanted to kind of make it okay on the island
Mm-hmm.
for everybody to practice whatever religion they want. That didn't
Sure.
go over all that well with people, because they were still at the point where they were like throwing people into the hot lava, the
Oh, boy.
volcanoes,
Yeah.
to appease the volcano gods. So,
Sure. Yeah.
so it was kind of a hard sell, but it turned out all right in the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very cool. I'm gonna have to look into that now. It sounds
Yeah,
like it'd be a
and I
fun
might be
movie
able to send you the link to watch it privately too. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'd be cool. Well, all right. So I'd like to transition a little bit. I think we got maybe a total of 3 questions out of the
Oh gosh.
icebreaker bucket.
Okay. You want me to dig in again?
No.
Oh, okay.
We'll come back to that. Maybe as a sort of B-roll segment, we'll just do rapid fire on the questions, and that'll be fun. But
Okay.
actually, kind of want to transition more to the kind of origin stories of Amanda Lauer, the author. So you talked about being a journalist, and so just take us back and kind of tell us, how did you get started, and kind of that progression over time.
Well, what I should probably say is a lot of the books I write have young women who are the leading ladies who have backgrounds very similar to mine.
Okay.
So obviously anything but groovy, but if you would read Royal and Ancient, that touches on my real background. So to go back to basically, so my dad was in the military. So for high school, I went to 3 high schools and different, hop back and forth between states for high school.
Sure. Yep.
And when I was a senior in high school, I met my husband, John Lauer. Believe it or not, this will really tell you, this will age me, but at a disco.
Yes.
In a bowling alley.
Nice.
Talk about the epitome of the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
And we ended up dating, and I went to school that fall to UW-Madison with the intent to get a degree in chemical engineering. My dad really felt that would be a great spot for women because, the world would be your oyster, right?
Yeah.
Well, I realized that there was no flexibility in that field at the time. Women were probably working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And I knew that we were getting serious and we would want to have a family. And I just thought, to spend 4 years going to school for this when I'm not even sure how long I would use this degree. So I actually disenrolled because we got engaged at Christmas time, my freshman year. So in January, I disenrolled from college and I went to work, and I found a job as a proofreader for a local insurance company, for basically their home office, an insurance company here in the Valley. And that was really my niche. I mean, I was really good at it. As a matter of fact, I was hired to be a file clerk, and I took the test, some kind of proofreading test, and they're like, nope, she's not going to be a file clerk. She'll be proofreading, which really fit me very well. So I did that until like 4 years, until we had our first child. And
Okay.
then I took 15 years off because we have 4 kids, and waited till my youngest was in second to go back into the workforce. And I went back into proofreading, and this time it was for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. They owned a series of newspapers up here that really needed proofreaders, so that, again, was perfect niche for me.
Sure.
And I did that till 2002. After 9/11, the newspaper industry was kind of shaky, and the advertising was shaky, so they ended up, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel shut down all the regional papers, so we were all out of a job. Like 4 months after 9/11. And I decided, when I was there, I actually learned to write articles because I proofread like thousands of articles, and I figured out how to do it.
Sure.
So I just started volunteering, like if anybody needed an article written about health, about houses, about industry, you name it, someone needed it. So my very first article, actually, I started covering boys football for Xavier High School. And I was the only female, I think, doing it at the time in like 1999, 2000. So that was an interesting experience. But again, I have a tendency to say yes first and then figure it out later and just do it. That's kind of how I run my life.
I love that attitude. So
Thank you.
I can relate.
Yeah. So I learned how to write. And after we were laid off, I said, that's it. I'm never punching a clock again in my life. I'm going to set out on my own. I'm going to be a freelancer. And I was freelancing for probably 24 newspapers and magazines around the state of Wisconsin. And then by chance, our youngest daughter had some health issues. She was a Make-A-Wish child for the state of Wisconsin in the year 2009. I said, I cannot keep up this schedule writing for all these papers. I had to pare it down. And I should say she's doing fine now.
Yeah, that's great.
She's doing great. And so I said I have to just pick the two that I like the best, and I'm going to continue with that. So it was The Business News based in Green Bay. We covered North Central and Northeast Wisconsin. Businesses, small businesses, which I just loved writing for them because I just feel like these small businessmen, they're just the heart of our state. They keep our state running. They employ so many people. I absolutely loved it. And then I also was writing for the Green Bay Diocese, writing a lot of human interest stories, which I also loved. Through the years, I met so many wonderful people. I loved both of those jobs. But by chance, when I was getting ready, I was making the transition. I wanted to write books full time. And the Business News was sold. And it seemed like the perfect time for me to bow out and let a younger group of people take over what I was doing.
Sure.
And then on December 31st this past year, the Compass stopped printing their actual newspaper, and they've gone to a different format, and they're not actually taking freelancers anymore, which is fine because I had my last paycheck from them in September, and I just knew it was coming to an end. I felt like God was just saying, it's time to transition, and so I did. And so now I'm working on writing novels full time.
Yeah, which I think that's amazing. And you said 13 books. So from the grind of that first book and thinking, hey, that's it for me, to 13 books. I mean, that to me, you're a successful author. I mean, that's that's not a one-hit wonder kind of thing, and you've had several awards, not just the one that you mentioned earlier from the screenplay that you worked on. But let's talk to me a little bit. I don't know if you can rattle them all off the top of your head, but you've won several awards.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I also have gotten awards for journalism too. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I had done a feature on Amy Hanton, she's the cooking mom. So I wrote about her for the Green Bay Diocese because she belongs to a diocesan parish. So I won an award for that. I can't remember what it is. I should. I'm sure I have the certificate somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But in 2016, I won the Kayla Award. So Kayla is Catholic Arts and Letters, but it was the top YA fiction book in the nation in 2016. That was for Worlds Such as Heaven Intended.
Okay.
And then in 2020, I won the CMA Award for A Freedom Such as Heaven Intended. So that was the top inspirational novel in the nation in 2020. And right now, I actually have my books up for a couple of other awards. We'll see what happens. We'll find out.
Good luck.
Thank you. And I'm not writing for the awards. I mean, it's cool and stuff, but I more so it's for the people and the reactions I get to my books. I was at a book signing maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this has happened numerous times of people. I'll be selling my books, and people don't always recognize that it's me. They think I'm just somebody from the Catholic Writers Guild or something.
Sure.
And I'll hear like, "Oh my gosh, it's my favorite book," or like, "Oh my gosh, here's her newest book," and I'll say it's me. But there was a teenager who came up with her mom, and she wanted to buy my newest books. I had 2 that came out in the fall, and she said, "I have read every book in your Heaven Intended series 5 times."
Wow.
And she said, whenever things are really getting me down, I just have to pick one of your books up. They just cheer me up. They just make me feel happy. I can get lost in that world. And that is not the first time I've heard that. I mean, especially with teenagers, I hear that a lot. But I even have, my niece has read them numerous times. And that's really a neat thing to hear that people will tell me I'm their favorite author, or that they just can't wait till the next book comes out, or they're just like so excited to meet me and get a selfie with me or something. It's kind of surreal because I'm like, I'm just me. I'm just my normal self sitting mostly by myself, 40 hours a week behind the screen, typing, not really interacting with anybody. This is kind of an unusual situation here to talk to somebody for like an hour.
We're having an actual conversation.
I know, right? Go figure. But it really, it's been very gratifying. And if I never had another book published, I would say I've had a beautiful and fulfilling career. But I'll keep going as long as God is opening these doors for me and giving me more ideas to write about.
It seems like there's no shortage of inspiration. And I think that, the thing that struck me that feels unique, I don't know a lot of authors, but you're being asked by friends and family, hey, will you write a book about me or for me? And you're like, yeah, I'll do that. And that just struck me as like, wow, really? I think I would say, well, come on now, you don't understand what it means to write a book. And I don't know, but you're like, no, I'll do that. And that sounds,
well, especially if someone gives me an inspiring idea. I'm like, sure. That's the hardest part, coming up with the main idea. If you're going to give me that, sure, I'll go for it.
Right, yeah. Well, maybe later I'll give you some ideas.
There you go.
Well, anyway, we're kind of, I think, at the point in the show where I'd like to kind of wind us down. And I've always asked every guest on the show for like a nugget, piece of wisdom. And the thing that everybody says, and I think if you went back and watched every episode, you'll hear the same answer. And so I'm going to take that one off the table.
Okay.
And that's the perseverance answer. They always say, just hang in there. Just stick with it. And I think that's kind of universal. Like I hear that from everybody. And so I'm looking for maybe a little something, else, maybe more novel or unique in that sense to just give our audience maybe a little bit more that they can take away. And so one of the ways I couch this, but you could kind of think of maybe you're talking to someone else who's an aspiring author, or you're talking to your younger self. And you have some things that you've learned along the way that really stick in your mind that would be helpful to that person.
Yeah. Well, I'm constantly learning, and especially I have some great copy editors who teach me stuff all the time. These people all have degrees in English, writing, what have you. I don't. So everything I've learned from scratch. Kind of an interesting thing that happened recently is my husband gave me a book called Save the Cat. And anybody who's ever written a screenplay knows this book. It's very famous, but I had never seen it till like a month ago. It was absolutely a game changer. I think that's why I wrote that book in 5 weeks, because this lays out very specifically how to write a screenplay. But if you multiply a screenplay by 2, that's a novel. So a 110-page screenplay is a 220-page book.
Okay.
And it tells you exactly what has to happen at each certain page breaks. Like by page 100, this must happen. At page 110, this must happen. At 150. I used that formula to write the Christmas book, and it was just like magic.
No kidding. Okay.
So you always have to be open to learning, and especially open, I don't want to say criticism per se, but feedback.
Right, yeah.
Be able to take feedback and grow from it. I mean, we all have egos, and no one likes to hear, these books are my babies, like, oh my gosh, don't talk about them like that,
Right, yeah.
But when I think back to the feedback I've gotten, it's just been really has made my books a way better product, and I'm so grateful for everybody along the way who's added some little tidbits for me to think about, to consider, because sometimes it's hard. It's like, oh man, I have to rewrite 3 chapters. I have to condense. This happens a lot. Condense 2 chapters into one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then when I see the final product, I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is way better.
So much better. Yeah.
So be able to take feedback, especially if people are really doing it because they're on your side, they're pulling for you, they're trying to help you.
Yeah.
Be open to learning, take the feedback. On a personal level, I try to tune in and see what God wants me to do and not be pushing water upstream. I always know when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing because it's so difficult. And then I'm like, I'm not supposed to be writing this manuscript right now. I'm supposed to be working on this. I try to get that feedback And one of the things I do, and this is completely random, but I don't plot my books out per se. And usually I go to bed and I think, okay, tomorrow I have to write a chapter, because I try to write one chapter a day. And then I'm like, okay, what is it going to be? And I learned this from somebody a long time ago, but it actually really works. So everybody has a guardian angel, right? So I actually pray to my guardian angel and say, give me the inspiration for what I need to be doing tomorrow. And it works like a charm. It's amazing. The idea will come to me in a dream that night. It'll come to me in the shower in the next morning. It'll be when I sit down, all of a sudden just these things flash in my head, and I just really feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. Sure. My guardian angel, he wants to help me. Everybody's guardian angels, they want to help you. We just never ask them, or we should. We should all ask them more. So I'm just open to that feedback too, and that inspiration, and
Well, okay. Thank you so much for that feedback. And to me, as I think about that idea of being receptive to criticism or receptive to feedback, it takes a great degree of humility.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh. Trust me, don't ever pray for humility. You'll get lots of chances to work on. Oh, my gosh. I've had more than my share of it. Yeah. I've eaten a lot of humble pie in the last 10 years.
Yeah. But I think, so I kind of put the challenge out to you to come up with something that would really be a great nugget for people as they think about a career. And this could be applied to any career or really any stage in life. And that's that ability to take feedback and not just like receive it but to incorporate it.
For sure.
Into a change, in your case, changes in the book. But well done, Amanda. I think your advice for our listeners or viewers was spot on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being on the podcast. And now we have a new cocktail inspired by Amanda Lauer, the Heavenly Vista.
We're going with it.
I like it. I think it's got a fun ring. So,
okay.
And you'll be able to find the recipe. Amanda, I'll hand you a copy of the recipe you can take home with you.
Thank you.
And then everybody else will be able to find that on the website when we publish it, and it'll show up in places like Pinterest and probably the video of me making this will show up on YouTube as well. And so along with the episode, which will be on Spotify and Apple, and then the video will be on YouTube.
Perfect.
And Facebook.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. We really don't get that many opportunities to just sit and chat.
We don't, yeah.
Every time we run into each other, we're at a concert or we're somewhere, it's busy, it's loud. We never actually get to interact this much, so I appreciate it. Maybe next time it'll be on a golf course. We'll be doing
which would be fun.
The Ale Cup that we do once a year.
Yeah. So the Ale Cup is sort of like a family reunion, so actually you actually hit on something there that I would like to leave with the viewers and listeners, just as a kind of closing thought. So one of the reasons that I was inspired to do this podcast, again, I've been blessed to work with and get to know so many talented entertainers and musicians in my career and in my life that I wanted to spend more time with them. So one, I wanted to tell their stories. I wanted to honor them with a cocktail kind of inspired by them, and then tell their story a little bit. But also just spend time talking to them and just enjoying their company and doing exactly what we're doing here, just having a bit of a conversation. And so that's always kind of been my inspiration. It was kind of like, hey, I just want to have those people over for a drink and just talk for a while.
Right.
And then I thought, well, hey, I'll turn that into a podcast.
Yeah,
It'll be kind of fun.
Cool.
So anyway, that's something you said there kind of made me think of, like, again, back to the inspiration for all this. So again, thank you, Amanda. I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with everyone, and hopefully they enjoy watching it as much as we enjoyed putting it together. So
thank you. Right. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to sign off. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Let me quick tell you the story
about. Sounds good. Let's hear it.
About meeting Archduke Edward Habsburg. This happened through Twitter, actually. A friend of mine who's a writer said that one of his daughters was reading one of her books. She was like so excited. So me, being the person who never says no to anything, and I I reach out to anybody.
Sure.
I reached out to him on Twitter and I said, so you have daughters? Well, he has 5 daughters and a son. I said, I write books for YA. I think your daughter might be interested in one of my books. Well, it turns out not only was she, and I was willing to send them to him. So he is the ambassador to the Holy See for the country of Hungary, I believe. And he's also an Archduke of Austria. And I had said I'd be more than willing to mail these books to Rome, where they were living and still are living. And he said, no, you're an author. He said, I'm an author. I know you need to make money. He said, I'll order them. So he did. He ended up getting the whole set for his daughter. And she says, I'm her favorite author. It's amazing, his daughter. And oh my gosh, those kids are so smart. They speak so many languages. German is their first language, and they speak Italian because they're living in Rome, and English, of course. So what happened is he was coming to the United States in 2021, I believe, because his uncle, the last Holy Roman Emperor, I think that's what they call it, the Archduke, Blessed Karl. So he's on the way to becoming a saint, Blessed Karl, and it was his feast day, I believe, October 21st. So he invited me and John to come to Washington, D.C. for this mass for his uncle. And
how cool.
It was amazing. So when we actually got there early, and we took Edward out to eat, and he wanted to eat something American. He said his son goes to college here, and it talks about this buffalo sauce. So he wanted like a buffalo chicken sandwich or something.
All right.
So we take him to a tavern, of course.
Yeah.
Right there is like the Washington Monument right behind us, and the White House or whatever, or the Capitol building. Actually, I think was right across from this place, and he loved it. And then he invited us to come to the Hungarian embassy. So we met him there, and I brought him a stack of like a dozen books, all different authors who write teen books, and to share with his daughters. He was the nicest guy. It was amazing. And then when I get to Mass, afterwards he had a reception, and he was talking about his uncle. Then he introduced me to his very dear friend, Calissa Ginrich. And Calissa and I struck up a friendship. She's from Wisconsin. And so we traded books. She sent me all her books. I gave her all my books. And we're on their Christmas card list. So every year, Newt and Calissa send us a Christmas card, and we send ours to them as well. So it was kind of a neat friendship. And he's just an amazing, oh my gosh. I just admire him so much. His kids are just wonderful. 2 of them now are in the United States going to college. And he's very diplomatic. But he's funny as heck.
Of course he
is,
is, yeah.
He's actually going to be in the United States in April in Texas for another thing for Blessed Karl. I wish I could go. I can't go to everything, but I do want to get together with him again. He gets to the United States several times a year.
Sure.
So yeah, he's very interesting. And also, he had written a children's book for his, it's based on a story that he always told his kids when they were growing up about a little double-headed eagle, which is on the family crest. He wrote it in German. That's his first language. And his daughter was studying English literature or something in college in Europe, one of his daughters. And so she did the first translation into English. And then he asked me to help to copy edit this book and to put it into American English and just to make sure the story flowed.
Yep.
It's really adorable. It's called W, the Double-Headed Eagle. And so I'll have copies of that at the next conference and I'll be signing because my name is on the inside of the book. And then he actually had his own book come out this last year, something like the Habsburg Way or something.
Okay.
And his publisher actually sent it to me because he wanted me to endorse his book, which I was just like, oh my gosh. Like everyone in the world knows this name. Their family is so famous.
Yeah.
And so I was just very touched that they sent me a copy ahead of time. And of course I loved it. It was amazing.
What a cool friendship. What an honor for him to like take such an interest in your work and engage you and involve you in his. So, when I think about the sort of spectrum of famous people, I imagine he's not the kind of person that gets recognized in public.
Not in the United States, probably in Europe.
Yeah, maybe in Europe, like you said, not in the U.S. But at the same time, he's famous on a historical level.
Oh,
at
absolutely.
Least the family name is
Oh my gosh, yeah.
on a historical level.
I think Emperor Constantine was his great something.
Yeah, right.
The first Holy Roman Emperor.
Right. Yeah. When you said Habsburg, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, it really
Habsburg?
is. Yeah. I have a
Like,
wonderful picture of us together, several pictures, at the restaurant, at the embassy, at all sorts of places.
Oh, how cool. Cool. Yeah, no, he definitely wins the, most famous person you know.
And Calista Gingrich would be more famous in U.S., obviously, because she's married to Newt Gingrich, so she's pretty famous, too.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, that's cool, too, of course. Well, anyway, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun having you. Oh, hey, one more thing. We'd love it if you followed us on social. Ampéritif on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Pinterest. And Ampéritif Podcast on Instagram.